Have you ever felt like motherhood completely changed your life while your partners stayed pretty much the same? While you're running on empty doing everything in the daily grind? Well, this week we're talking to Dr. Morgan Cutlip, who felt that way too. And she's sharing how she reclaimed her identity even when she was in the thick of it. Welcome to Mom's Guide to Finding Herself, where we share stories of side hustles and surviving while parenting young children. I'm your host, Chrissy Bold. Let's make motherhood less lonely and help you find joy in being you again. Motherhood changes everything, and no one prepares us for just how much of ourselves we're going to lose in the process. We're told to soak up every moment, but what about when we don't even feel like a person anymore? I remember the moment that hit me. It was like I was just a body moving through the day, meeting everyone's needs, managing the chaos, but I was completely losing myself in the process. It was like my basic wants and needs weren't being met, but worse, it didn't even feel like that mattered. I was in full survival mode, running on autopilot, reacting instead of living, and somewhere along the way, I had disappeared. I didn't realize just how deep I had sunk until one day I caught a glimpse of my reflection and I barely recognized myself. And I don't really mean physically, but more emotionally, right? I used to have passions, hobbies, things that made me feel like me. But at that point, I was just getting through the day. And then it was like almost magic. I came across Dr. Morgan Cutlip's book, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself. At the time, it was in pre launch, and I was desperate for something or anything that made me feel like human again. And come on, that title spoke directly to my soul. I joined her launch group and I read the book alongside her and other moms who felt the exact same way. And piece by piece, I started to rebuild myself. The discussions that we had, the reflections that we made, they all forced me to confront the fact that I had been running on empty for way too long. That experience is one of the reasons why I do this podcast, because I know what it feels like to wonder if you'll ever come back to yourself. And I know the power of hearing someone say, I've been here too. And Dr. Morgan has been here. In today's conversation, she shares how she spent her entire life immersed in relationship psychology. She grew up with a father who was a psychologist. And then she went on to pursue advanced degrees in human development and counseling psychology. She dedicated years to understanding relationships and emotional well being. But yet, when she became a mom, all of that knowledge and training did not prepare her for the total identity shift that hit, like a tidal wave. She spent years studying relationships, but she wasn't prepared for the way motherhood would strip her down and force her to redefine everything. Today, Dr. Morgan is an author and a relationship expert. With her down-to-earth style, she offers couples and individuals the tools that they need to tackle the trickiest relationship issues. She offers a fresh perspective and some really powerful frameworks. She has a really special way of translating psychological theory and research into practical, accessible, and actionable advice. And she shares it so beautifully with her clients, her social media followers at Dr. Morgan Cutlip, her books, her courses, her podcast, and her blog as co-founder of mylovethinks.com. Dr. Morgan earned her master's in human development and family science and her doctorate in counseling psychology, and her latest book, A Better Share, is going to be available nationwide on April 8th, 2025. But what I love the most about Dr. Morgan's story is that she doesn't just stop at acknowledging the struggle. She gives us tools on how to change it. She shares how she started to reclaim her own sense of self and how she and her husband worked to rebalance their relationship and how she helps other women do the same. If you've ever felt buried under the weight of motherhood, and if you've ever wondered when it'll be your turn again, this episode is for you. I am here with Dr. Morgan Cutlip. Dr. Morgan has two kids, ages 9 and 11, and she is a super mom in the way that I just completely admire everything that you've ever done, Dr. Morgan. And I'm so grateful that you are here with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, probably most of my listeners have at least checked out your Instagram page at this point. So they might have a little taste of the knowledge that you bring to us and the expertise and all of the hard work that you've done to help women understand how they can mother a little bit easier and feel a little bit
Mm.
more lighter in their day to day. But I want to hear your journey today, like, because no mom has a magic card where we get through all of this unscathed. So tell me, who were you before you became a mom?
Ooh, I've never been asked that. That's a great question. Before I became a mom, I feel like I was just a student. It feels like I've been a student my entire life. So I grew up in Ohio and a pretty rural town. I met my husband in high school. And I feel like I always have to say this because I'm in the field of relationships. So if I don't say this, I lose street cred.
Sure.
But we dated on and off. We dated like 3 years in high school, on and off through college, and then we went about 5 years without speaking. And this is gonna age me, but we reconnected on MySpace.
Yeah.
So that's my relationship story. Been married 16 years. So yeah, grew up in Ohio. I worked alongside sort of like feels like my dad from forever. He went back to school to get his doctorate in psychology when I was in grade school,
Okay.
and I used to go to classes with him
Oh,
sometimes.
fun.
And yeah, it's wild. I actually had one of the professors that I sat in on when I was around 6 years old. It's
Whoa.
crazy. It
Yeah.
was her last year, and we would play this game in the car where he would give me a hypothetical case, and he'd be like, "How are you gonna help this family? How are you gonna help this couple? What do you think this little boy needs?" And it was just my favorite time with my dad.
Yeah.
And he started developing courses. He had got his doctorate in psychology, started developing courses for relationships way before everybody else was doing that. I mean, I know the Gottmans and there's these like perennial people, but around that time, and I started traveling with him to conferences and eventually worked with him for around 15 years. So it feels if I mean, I attended my PhD graduation. I had to delay it
Okay.
because I had our daughter Effie.
Okay.
But I attended it when she was 2 months old. We flew from Florida to Ohio, and it was like so stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember, like, being at the airport, she's losing her mind, and I was like, "I'm not gonna go, like, I
Right?
can't do this," and, yeah, it was very intense, so, to me, like, before becoming a mother, I feel like, "Oh my gosh, I've been a student my
Yeah.
entire life, of this profession and relationships," and so, yeah, that's what it
That's what
feels
it
like.
sounds like. Yeah, we talk a lot about teaching our kids emotional intelligence and being able to
Mhm.
talk about their emotions, but you had, like, the PhD level of this as a child.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. We definitely had a little bit of that family life where, like, we talked about a lot, we
Yeah.
had family meetings, we did the things I feel like my dad, for being a PhD in psychology, and I don't hopefully he doesn't listen to this, but, he's more analytical.
Sure.
So, feelings were part of it, but very much, more of, like, a cognitive guy. So we grew up analyzing a lot of things, and so that I enjoyed that. I enjoy that, though, so that was fun.
I can see that. There's, like, the research piece of it, like, the let's geek
Yeah.
out over all of this stuff
Yes.
versus yeah, there's 2 pieces and both of them are very valuable. So I
Yeah.
understand that. So you were then finishing your PhD and here you are with a newborn baby who's screaming in the airport. So tell me about your transition to motherhood.
My transition to motherhood was definitely not what I expected it to be. I was finishing up my internship. We were living outside of DC at the time, so it was at George Mason University. Finishing up my internship, and we were building a home in Florida. So I'm from Ohio, living in Virginia, but moving to Florida because my parents moved there. And we wanted to be close to family when we had kids, and I moved to Florida when I was about 9 months pregnant, and I
Whoa.
rapid yeah, 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 it was wild. It was kind of radical, and I switched care, so I ended up delivering with a midwife in Florida, and so I was working with a doctor in Virginia, so I, like, rapidly went to, like, rapid fire, like, classes and prenatal stuff and,
Right.
like, caught up with all of that, and then I had our daughter, and, 2 months after she was born, my husband was, basically told that he needed to take a job in Southern California, and
Oh,
so our home, we had literally just moved
yeah.
in, wasn't even fully decorated or anything, and we had to leave, and so I decided at that time that I wanted to stay in Florida. I lived like 3 blocks from my parents because he was gonna be figuring out his way, and
Yep.
I didn't really wanna do beginning of motherhood in, like, temporary housing and all this
Right.
stuff, so, he left, and then from about Effie being her name's Effie, 2 months to about 8 months, somewhere in there, we just kinda, like, saw each other every so many weeks, and, I didn't move to California until she was about 10 months old. So my entry to motherhood was kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say it was traumatic, but I was scared to have a second child because
Sure.
I felt so alone in that transition. I was shocked at how unprepared I was. Despite my, I have a master's in human development and family science. And I was like, that did nothing to prepare me. I thought I knew what I was doing. And so I felt really shocked
Yeah.
and overwhelmed and buried by it all and lost and anxious. I'm not really an anxious person. I felt very anxious in early motherhood. And to do it alone um, for a lot of those months, I think set my husband and I up to have a very uneven distribution of involvement with our daughter.
Right, because it's like you had the whole survival mode by
Yeah.
yourself, whereas that
Yeah.
is typically this like boot camp training program for both
Oh my
partners.
gosh.
And he didn't get that training, that in that basic training.
No,
Yeah.
no, and I joke when I speak about this stuff, I joke that our daughter Effie is kinda like a scary baby.
Yeah.
Like, she's just had one of those temperaments. I mean, they're called spicy or deeply
Yeah. Yeah.
feeling now,
Yeah.
but she was scary
Yeah.
to me, and,
Fair enough.
yeah, and it was just like she just had opinions about everything right out of the gate, and, I feel like also part of it was, he did not, Chad, my husband's name, he did not really step in well and take that initiative when we were together, but also I kinda, like, figured out how to manage our scary baby because I
Right.
was on my own, so when he would try to do it and it wasn't going well, I'd be like, "Psh, get out of here, like, I know what I'm doing. I got all the tips and tricks."
Right.
So, it was a matter of me pushing him out
Mhm.
and him not stepping in enough.
Sure, which can happen anyway. Oh, I mean, I think it happens probably 90% of the time. Like, it's probably an astronomically high statistic. They
Yeah.
call it maternal gatekeeping, but I think it's just like, it's just easier a lot of the
It is. It's just
times.
easier if I do it,
Right,
yes.
exactly. But when somebody isn't there to at least witness and have these tools just like even in the back of their brain, it's now you're at 8 months and you're coming out of the survival mode, and I've found
Yeah.
talking to so many women now that it's, like, usually around that mark, like, 9 to 12-month
Mhm.
mark that people are out of survival mode, and they're now like, "Who am I as a person?" And now that's that time to have an identity crisis, but now you're in charge of a different person trying to help them with
Yes.
you. So how was that?
So when I had Chad with me?
Yeah, yeah, because 'cause you're training
Yeah.
him while figuring yourself out and yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like I actually came up for air until much later,
Okay.
actually, because her tantrums started around 13 months,
Yeah.
and they went on for a while, so I felt like I was kind of getting a handle on the newborn phase, and then we went right into that
Yeah.
phase, and I was like, "Whoa." I had this vision of how I would be as a mom, and this was not what was happening in my reality. So, with him, I think the best way to describe it is like the roots of resentment grew quickly. I just was shocked. We have a great relationship. We had a wonderful relationship before kids, and this experience, what it really felt like for me was, wow, my life's really changed and yours has pretty much stayed the same.
Mhm.
That's really, I think,
Mhm.
if I had a story I was sort of telling myself about our relationship at the
Mhm.
time that really didn't help my attitude toward him, that would be it. I mean, and there was truth to it. So it's not as if I was just fabricating this, but It was shocking how quickly these early years of having kids can really, really stir up quite a bit of
Yeah.
resentment, feelings of unfairness, frustration in your relationship. I mean, plus you're just surviving off of less resources.
Right.
So you don't have as much to really pull from in terms of like managing your conflict well and things like that. And I think that was really the most jarring thing for me.
Yeah, that is a lot. Now, you touched on something too of your ideal, and you talk about this in your book as well. I like to call it like a mom type. We
Yeah.
see in on Instagram like whatever hashtag you might fall under, the
Mhm.
Pinterest mom, whatever, and we have
Mhm.
this version of who we think we'll be when we become that, and then oftentimes we become somebody that our old self wouldn't be proud of,
Yeah.
and that mismatch is really hard. Did you experience that too? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do unpack this quite a bit in my book. For me, something I had to recognize and to identify was that my mom was adopted, and she was adopted by a couple who was like pretty cold, actually. It's kind of wild. Like you want a kid, you adopt a kid, and then you're like not that involved with your child. So
Right.
it's very strange.
Right.
So to be abandoned,
Yeah.
that already gives, it's already a lot of issues with
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And then to be sort of neglected by your adoptive parents. My mom really went into motherhood at a very young age, by the way. She had me at how old was she? 21
Okay. Yeah.
when she had me. Married at 19, so very, very young.
Mhm.
Um, she went into motherhood with sort of like I describe it as her pain fueled her sort of like fire to change how she approached motherhood. And so I had a mom who was that sort of 90s, 80s, 90s super mom,
Yep.
where she was like
Yep.
room mom. She coached all of my sports. She ended up getting elected to the president of the board of education. Like she's
Yeah.
just this woman,
Yeah.
I mean, still to this day, she like makes soup anytime a neighbor's sick. Like she is on it. And I remember in early motherhood, I mean, I was working still with my dad. I mean, I have pictures of, the week after I gave birth, I'm like on my laptop working
Yeah.
with, Effie next to me. And I remember just being like, why am I always falling
Yeah.
short? And I think something we don't realize a lot of times is we sort of take these early experiences in our own ways of being mothered, and we sort of just use them as a template and slap them on our experience, and those become expectations we've never even explored
Mhm.
about what it means to be a good mom, because we
Right.
all have a definition we've internalized about a good mom does. And I was taking all the stuff my mom did, and that was my measure.
Yeah.
And my life looked vastly different than hers. And so I had to come to terms with that. And I had to make adjustments in how I measure what a good mom is and how to sort of calibrate my standards. And that took some time
Yeah.
and it was painful though before I recognized that and got to that place.
Yeah, you have to grieve the vision that you had because that
Yeah.
person that you thought you'd be doesn't exist, and but
Yeah.
you just know so much more. That like, that person didn't know you. They didn't know all of the things you're gonna be facing. So it's tough, that mismatch is really hard. Now, you
Yeah.
said that you had a lot of anxiety about transitioning to a second baby, but ultimately you did. Can you tell me how you got to that?
I remember talking about it with Chad, and I was like, "I don't know if I can do this." And, Effie was, like I said, she was spicy.
Yeah.
She's, like, just the most incredible kid.
Yep.
Like, I love her. I love her spice. Um, but we were like, "I don't think I can
It's
do
a
it
lot.
again."
Yeah.
But then also, I don't think this can be an only child. So
Sure.
we were just like in this tough
Yeah.
spot. But it's funny, I was early with Effie, and I was, and I do believe our mental and emotional state plays into our pregnancy.
Mm.
I mean, that's not my expertise, but it just
Yeah.
feels like that makes sense
Mhm.
how things show up in our bodies. But I was late with our son Roy,
Mhm.
and my I had a midwife, and not for everybody, but that's
Sure,
what I
yeah.
wanted. And I had a midwife, and I remember she was like, "You need to, your body is holding on." And I had a complication with my first birth, and she
Mhm.
thought that's what I was afraid of,
Mm.
and it wasn't. What I was afraid of was having a postpartum experience with my husband
Sure.
that was similar to my first one. And so, I remember I had to have a talk with Chad where I was just like, "I'm so worried you're not gonna." be there. You're not going to do enough. We're going to have a major life change again. Like, I just can't. That was not the experience I wanted in early motherhood. It was really, really hard and overwhelming. And it wasn't until after, it was like pretty quickly after that conversation that he was born. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a hard transition.
Amazing what your body can do and what you hold on
Oh,
to. You're like, "This
yes.
is so much easier if you're right here." This is
Yes.
not there.
So much comes out. I mean, our bodies speak to
Yeah,
us so loudly, so much comes out in the
definitely.
physical form.
Yeah, definitely. Now you talk in your book, you use the phrase "deselfing" a lot, and, I'd love to hear your experience with that, where we kind of depersonalize who we are as individuals because
Mhm.
our basic needs and wants aren't getting met anyway, so why am I even a person? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, yes, that's what deselfing is. It's essentially backburnering yourself
Mm.
in order to care for everybody else, and it's wild, like, it's just sort of part of being a woman in many ways in our
Right.
society because we are socialized really to self-sacrifice for the
Mhm.
preservation of everyone else, and I mean, it's a really dicey thing in motherhood
Mhm.
because we have to sort of de-self in the beginning.
Right.
In order to get up in the middle of the night and to feed your baby however you do it, like all the things require us to really put ourselves
Mhm.
on the back burner. And I think where it became problematic for me, and I think many moms and women out there, is that sometimes we sort of just get locked into
Right.
that mode. So we become so disassociated from ourselves and we become so used to being on the back burner, so de self that we lose touch with who we are. So it's like, yeah, you do it in the infant stage, maybe in the toddler stage a bit, but then you can kind of like come back to life. But if we never do that, if we never shuffle back to sort of like taking turns, we don't, I don't think we have to be first
Mm.
in terms of needs, but we have
Sure.
to take
We have to be in the
turns.
top
We have to
10
get it.
at least, right?
We gotta get a turn. We need to be
Yeah.
in the
Yes.
rotation. And so, but a lot of us just click in to being on in the back and we will go 10 years, 12 years, 18 years. That's why a lot of I think women, their kids leave and they're like, they might even resent their children for leaving them
Yeah.
because it's like so much of who they are is wrapped into it, into become being a mom and putting everyone else first. So for me, it was probably when the kids were maybe like 5 and 7 or so somewhere around there where I was just like, "This is enough."
Yeah, that's a
Like,
long time. Yeah.
I got stamina.
Yeah.
I got a lot of stamina,
I can
so
tell.
I lived in it,
Yeah.
for a while. But, yeah, that's when it started really hitting me, and I remember it created tension in our relationship
Yeah.
when I started to shift. Maybe a little they were maybe a little bit
Sure.
younger, but I remember my husband being like, "You're different," and I was like, "Nope, nope, I
Right.
am the same, I
Right.
am just not I'm just not
Right.
making everything so small anymore." So we both had to make some
Yeah.
changes in order to sort of me come back into connection with myself.
Yeah.
And it serves our relationship so much better though that I have.
Yeah. That's powerful to hear that it took so long because I think so many moms put pressure on themselves to bounce back really
Mm,
quickly. And I hate that phrase because or even get back to who you were because you aren't that person anymore. You might not even like those things anymore. So to think about bouncing back isn't there. But it's a project truly to like keep coming into who you are in this new phase of life and
yes.
what you like. So to hear for somebody who's an expert that it took several years to feel more whole,
Yes.
more like a complete person again is validating. Like there's nothing wrong with me for having a 4-year-old feeling like, ugh, I still don't know who I am.
No, and I think that's normal. I mean, I think I say this in the book, but motherhood is supposed to be expansive.
Hmm.
Like there are going to be things that are triggered in us
Hmm.
that require us to examine, who we are, how we show up, some of the stuff we've been probably avoiding dealing with. And because of this, it's kind of like this beautiful part of being a parent. It's also the very hard part of being a parent. But this challenges us to become someone better.
Yeah.
So we can say someone new, but somebody better than we would have been on our own. And that's going to take multiple iterations and evolutions, and that takes time. And I think, if we're if we're paying attention and we're willing to do some of the work, we're going to keep evolving throughout these years that we're parents, and becoming better versions of ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to hear everything about your whole parenting journey, but I mean, us moms, we can only listen to so much at a time. So
Yes.
we will have you back for the next episode where we can hear about how this new version of Morgan came out and said, no more. We, we're sharing the load more. So I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the mental load in the next episode.
Thank you for having me.
Do you feel like you're carrying the weight of your family on your shoulders and you're ready to create more fairness and less resentment in your relationship? You'll want to tune into the next episode where Dr. Morgan comes back to share about her book, A Better Share, and how to address the mental load with your partner while bringing back the fun. This is going to be a really great episode to share with your partner or even listen together. Until then, take a moment for yourself and remember you are an amazing mom, just as you are. I would love to hear how this episode has helped you. Scroll down to the comments or reviews and leave me a note there. This will make a big impact in helping moms like us find the show. Make sure to click those 5 stars and follow so you can join me on this journey of finding ourselves.